Imagine you're just 9 years old. It's storming outside, and your house is warm and safe. Yet, you pack your backpack, sneak out before sunrise, and walk into the rain. No one ever sees you again. Why would a child do that? Welcome back to the Criminal Minds, where truth hides in plain sight. Hit that subscribe button and join us as we explore the darkest corners of the human mind. The wind howled through the quiet streets of Shelby, North Carolina, that Sunday evening, February 13th, 2000. The kind of night where parents tuck their kids in early, where storm warnings were just background noise on local television. Outside, it was cold and wet, but inside the small, modest home on Oakcrest Drive, the Degree family was winding down after a long weekend. The house sat just off a cul-de-sac, a place where neighbors knew each other, and families lived by a quiet rhythm. Asha Jakia Degree, a fourth grader at Folsom Elementary, was finishing up a Valentine's Day project she had been working on. She was neat, organized, and careful. Her little hands moved with intent as she glued paper hearts onto a folded red construction sheet. It wasn't just homework. It was something she was excited about. Asha always looked forward to school events. The decorations, the candy, the games, they were like holidays to her. In the living room, the TV murmured low, while her older brother O'Brien sat near her, his attention half on a basketball game and half on his math worksheet. Their mother, Aquila, moved between the kitchen and the hallway, packing lunches for the next day, wiping counters, and checking the laundry. Their father, Harold, had left earlier in the afternoon for his overnight job at PPG Industries. He wouldn't be home until after midnight. Nothing felt unusual. No sign that this night would change everything. At 8 p.m., Aquila called out, "All right, you two, bedtime." Asha and O'Brien brushed their teeth, changed into their pajamas, and crawled into the twin beds that sat across from each other in their shared bedroom. Asha, ever particular, lined her school books up on the dresser beside her. She slid her favorite basketball jersey under her pillow. She had a game that weekend. Maybe she'd do better than last time. Outside, the rain had begun to fall. Asha was, by every account, a remarkable child. She stood just 4'6", with expressive brown eyes and two tightly braided pigtails that bounced as she walked. She was shy, polite, and reserved in new environments, but within her family and among close friends, she was full of life. Her laugh could light up a room. She was a rule follower, a churchgoer, and a dreamer. Her favorite book was The Whipping Boy. She had never spent a night away from home. At 12:30 a.m., Harold came home from work and peeked into the children's room. They were sleeping peacefully. He locked the front door and went to bed beside his wife. Around 2:30 a.m., he woke up again, not for any reason in particular. Maybe it was the wind rattling against the windows. Maybe it was just habit. He walked down the hall again and glanced into Asha and O'Brien's room. Still sleeping. The storm was picking up now. Thunder rolled low across the sky. Street lights flickered in the rain. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked. By 4 a.m., the house was still. Then, almost silently, Asha stirred. She opened her eyes and sat up. Her brother didn't notice. He was turned to the wall, facing away. She moved slowly, deliberately. She reached under her bed and pulled out a small bag, her black Tweety Bird backpack. She'd packed it earlier. No one knew when. Inside were a few changes of clothes, some school supplies, and a brush. There may have been something else. A book, candy, a photo. She dressed in long pants, a white long-sleeve shirt, and sneakers. Without a sound, she walked to the front door, and she disappeared into the storm. The rain fell in sheets by 4:15 a.m., drenching the quiet cul-de-sac. Highway 18, normally empty that early, shimmered under the headlights of a lone pickup truck. Inside, 24-year-old Michael Johnson was heading to a fish fry at his cousin's house, earbuds in, lost in a gospel playlist. As he rounded the bend just a mile from Oakcrest Drive, something caught his eye, a small figure in a white shirt struggling against the wind, walking on the grassy shoulder. His music skipped as he slammed on the brakes. He killed the engine and rolled down his window, the roar of wind and rain flooding in. "Hey, little girl, are you okay?" he shouted, leaning forward. She looked up at him for a moment, wide, brown eyes streaked from rain. Then, without a word, she turned and sprinted across the wet pavement into the nearby woods. Michael's heart pounded. "Ma'am? Miss?" He watched as she melted into the darkness of pine and oak. He fumbled for his phone, dialing 911 with numb fingers. At 6:28 a.m., the Shelby County dispatcher paged Officer Kevin Malone. By 6:35, Malone and his partner, Officer Lisa Harper, were rolling down Oakcrest Drive with lights flashing. Harper had been on the force for 5 years and had never seen a call quite like this. Missing juvenile, last seen walking into woods near Highway 18. They arrived at the Degree home to find Harold pacing on the porch, phone pressed into his ear, his breath visible in the cold pre-dawn air. Aquila stood beside him, tears mixing with raindrops on her cheeks. "Mr. Degree?" Officer Malone called, stepping onto the porch. Harold lowered the phone. "Her name is Asha Degree. She never comes out before sunrise. I don't understand." His voice shook. Officer Harper gently placed a hand on Aquila's shoulder. "Ma'am, we're going to do everything we can. Can you tell us exactly when you last saw her?" In the living room, O'Brien let the officers in. He pointed to the children's bedroom. "She was here when I woke up at 6:30 for breakfast," he said quietly. Harper and Malone exchanged glances. "But you didn't wake her up?" they prompted. O'Brien shook his head. "No, she was gone." Within minutes, a perimeter was established. Police taped crisscross the front yard and stretched down Oakcrest Drive. Neighbors, roused by flashing lights, pressed against the tape, offering bits of information. By 7 a.m., 2 bloodhound teams arrived from the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation. The dogs sniffed around the front door, the hallway floor, and the children's bed sheets. They picked up a scent leading out to the gravel driveway, then on to Highway 18. The dogs hesitated at the highway's edge, spooked by passing trucks and swirling rain. By 9 a.m., the search had grown to 50 volunteers. Church members, local Boy Scout troops, and family friends. They fanned out in teams of 5, each with a 2-mile stretch of road or wooded area. One volunteer, Mary Ellen Parker, tearfully described how she'd seen a small white sweater on a branch near a creek bed. But when she called it in, police found only broken twigs and muddy footprints. Every lead was scoured, every sighting logged. The rain, however, washed away most signs. Rain turned into sleet by mid-morning, soaking searchers to the bone and forcing them to retreat to the County Community Center for dry clothes and a briefing. As word spread, local news vans arrived. Reporters set up tripods under canopies. Cameras rolled as Aquila repeated her plea. "Please, if anyone saw my baby, bring her home." Even as tears streamed down her face, her voice remained steady, determined. By afternoon, the first tips began rolling in from surrounding counties. A small girl matching Asha's description spotted at a gas station 20 miles north. Another call about a suspicious dark sedan cruising the highway at 3 a.m. Police pursued each tip with caution. Harold and Aquila clung to hope, driving in separate cars, stopping at each reported sighting. But hours passed with no sign of Asha. At sunset, the search wound down, but the perimeter remained. Lights from squad cars dotted the road like fallen stars. The storm had moved on, leaving a cold moonlit night in its wake. The next morning, search teams returned before sunrise. It was still cold and wet, but the volunteers were determined. Police officers, neighbors, and friends formed lines and walked through fields and woods, calling Asha's name. Every rustle of leaves made hearts race. By the 5th day, the roads and paths had been searched many times. Tracks in the mud had washed away. The rain had turned the ground to slippery clay. Bloodhounds lost their scent more than once. Still, no sign of Asha. Harold and Aquila sat in the living room, holding each other, staring at Asha's empty bed. They took turns sleeping, but neither slept well. Each noise, wind against the window, creaking floorboards, made them jump up, hoping she'd come home. Volunteers left homemade signs on every street corner. A photo of Asha in her white shirt, her braids tied tight, smiling at the camera. Underneath, in big letters, "Missing, have you seen me?" By the end of the second week, hundreds of calls had come into the sheriff's office. Most were false leads. a girl matching Asha's description at a bus station in Charlotte, and a child seen near a convenience store in Winston-Salem. Police and family drove to those places, only to find no one. Local schools held assemblies. Teachers asked students to be on the lookout. Neighbors offered to babysit O'Brien so Aquila and Harold could rest. Grocery stores donated food to the family. The whole town felt the pain. Still, hope flickered. A phone call on day 10. A truck driver said he saw a child wrapped in a blanket on the side of I-85. Officers rushed there. Nothing. At night, Harold sat by the window, phone in hand, waiting for a message. When it never came, he felt the weight of each passing hour like a stone on his chest. Every evening, the sheriff held a news briefing. Reporters asked the same questions. Any new leads? Why would Asha leave home? Did she plan this? Sheriff Medina pressed his lips together. We are following every lead. We will find her. In their kitchen, Aquila folded laundry, tiny socks, a pink t-shirt, school uniforms. Everything smelled like Asha. She pressed the clothes to her face. I miss you, she whispered. O'Brien sat at the table, tracing Asha's name in crayon on a piece of paper. Bring her home, he wrote, over and over. As the search teams prepared to head out on day 14, Harold stopped them at the door. Please, he said, voice shaking, look near the old factory on Michael Road. A volunteer nodded without hesitation and ran off into the gray morning. By midday, the volunteer returned. Nothing but empty buildings, he said. Harold nodded, tears welling up. He placed his hand on the wall for support. Thank you, he whispered. That afternoon, a knock came at the door. It was Reverend Simmons, carrying a bag of home-cooked soup. We're all praying for you, he said softly, handing the soup to Aquila. She managed a small smile. Days passed into nights. Each morning, the search teams met at the church and split into groups again. They searched riversides, old logging roads, and abandoned cabins. They even used drones with heat sensors, hoping to catch a glimpse of Asha's body or that bright white shirt against dark trees. The drones found nothing. By the third week, fatigue set in. Volunteers grew silent, exhausted, and damp. The sheriff's office moved the command center to the county fairgrounds to get more space. The family stopped taking phone calls, too worn out to answer. They sat in the shade of a trailer, holding hands and praying in silence. Yet, in the faces of the searchers, you could still see determination. Even if the path was hard, they refused to give up. They refused to let Asha's name fade. As the weeks slipped by, the search became more careful. Teams started marking every spot they'd already checked. Flyers multiplied, posted on every pole and storefront within 100 miles. But inside the Degree home, the silence grew heavier. Still, no trace of Asha. 18 months after Asha vanished, a man named Tony Walker was clearing ground at an old construction site in Burke County. It was August 2001, and he was digging a hole when his shovel hit something soft. He knelt and pulled out a black Tweety Bird backpack. It was wrapped in 2 trash bags and buried under dirt and rocks. His heart pounded. He called the sheriff's office right away. When officers arrived, they carefully unwrapped the bags. Inside, they found Asha's white long-sleeve shirt, now stained, a pair of long pants, too big to be hers, a folded note that was blank on both sides, a New Kids on the Block concert t-shirt with a name tag reading Jenny. Nothing else. No shoes, no school papers, no photo, no trace of Asha herself. Sheriff Medina said, "This backpack tells us someone brought it here. We just don't know who or why." The backpack was taken to the crime lab. Crime scene investigators dusted for fingerprints. They found none. They swabbed for DNA. Nothing matched any profiles in the system. Asha's family was called to the sheriff's office. Aquila and Harold stood side by side, staring at the bag that once held their daughter's things. Aquila touched the Tweety Bird logo, her hand shaking. How could someone hurt her and hide her things like this? She whispered. The lab tests were slow. Weeks went by with no new answers. The backpack only deepened the mystery. Who placed it there? Why wrap it so carefully? And why leave a shirt with someone else's name? After the backpack was found, theories began to swirl again. The groomer theory, some believe Asha may have met someone online or in person who convinced her to leave. But the family had no computer or cell phone. There was no evidence she spoke with strangers. The stranger abduction, others thought a stranger saw her walking alone in the rain and grabbed her. But why wait 18 months to bury her backpack? And why include the Jenny shirt? The family's secret, a hushed rumor, suggested someone close to the Degree family knew more than they admitted. But no one ever came forward with proof. Police investigated relatives, family friends, and church members. All cleared. The planned escape, some argued Asha planned to leave home forever. But a 9-year-old with no money, no ride, and no plan? It seemed impossible. Asha loved her family too much to run away. Each theory held pieces of truth and pieces of doubt. Detectives re-interviewed neighbors, checked phone records, and studied every tip. They even brought in a psychic to review the case. The psychic claimed Asha was buried under an oak tree near where the backpack was found, but searches turned up only rocks and roots. No solid lead emerged. 16 years after Asha disappeared, in the spring of 2016, the case was reopened. A new tip arrived. Someone claimed they saw a girl matching Asha's description, now 14 years old, getting into a dark green 1970s Ford Thunderbird near a gas station off Highway 74. Agents immediately checked local records for any Thunderbird registration. They drove to the old gas station at the edge of Cleveland County, North Carolina, and spoke with the current owner. He'd only worked there since 2010. No one remembered seeing a girl at night. Investigators then canvassed the area. They showed Asha's photo to people who lived or worked nearby in 2000 and asked about any old green car they might recall. A retired truck driver said he remembered an old Thunderbird with rust spots that stopped once in 2000. He thought he saw a little girl in the passenger seat, but he wasn't sure it was Asha. He hadn't reported at the time because he assumed it was someone's child out with their parent. Agents ran vehicle identification number checks on all green Thunderbirds sold in North Carolina between 1995 and 2005. They traced several, but most owners had clear alibis or were ruled out. One Thunderbird was scrapped in 2008. Another had been sold out of state. Despite weeks of digging, no one ever came forward with firm proof. No fingerprints. No eyewitness who could swear it was Asha. Still, this tip renewed hope. The FBI made posters of 14-year-old reenactment of Asha's face and shared them with local police departments in Tennessee and South Carolina in case she'd been taken out of state. Through the years, Asha's parents, Harold and Aquila, refused to let her case die. They formed the Bring Asha Home Committee, joined by volunteers across North Carolina. They held annual candlelight vigils every Valentine's Day at the old construction site where the backpack was found. They never stopped believing Asha was alive, or that they might one day find her remains and finally have answers. Every phone call, even an anonymous tip, brought a surge of hope and anxiety. When a letter arrived in 2018, postmarked unknown, they opened it with trembling hands, only to find blank pages. Their hearts sank, but they pressed on. As the years passed, search teams used better tools to look for Asha. In 2020, investigators tried ground-penetrating radar at the old construction site. The radar sent signals into ground to find hidden objects. Volunteers watched the screen, hoping to see something that looked like Asha's remains or her backpack. The radar picked up a few odd shapes, roots, rocks, a metal pipe, but nothing that led to Asha. That same year, detectives used sonar technology on lakes and ponds nearby. Sonar sends sound waves underwater to map the bottom. They scanned the surface of Lake Shelby and two smaller ponds where footprints had been seen long ago. The sonar images showed fallen trees and silt, but no sign of body or personal items. In 2021, authorities teamed up with a forensic genealogy unit. They looked at old DNA evidence, some soil samples from the backpack, some hairs found during the first search, and tried to match them to any living relatives not already in the system. But the results were inconclusive. The DNA did not point to a known person. Still, each new tool renewed hope. Every scan, every test, gave Asha's family a reason to believe that answers might be around the corner. By Valentine's Day 2022, it had been 22 years since Asha left her home. Aquila and Harold's hair had turned gray, but their determination never faded. Their community still gathered at the construction site for a candlelight vigil. Children who were toddlers and now brought their kids, hearing for the first time about the little girl who walked into the storm. O'Brien, now grown and working in Charlotte, joined the search teams whenever he was home. He carried Asha's school notebook in his backpack, flipping through the pages as a reminder of who she was. He helped update the case website and talked to reporters about the need for fresh eyes and fresh ideas. Local police departments kept the case file open. Every recruit at the sheriff's office was given a copy of Asha's story to study, so that no officer will forget the cold case that haunted their county. In 2023, something unexpected happened. A man who used to live near the degrees back in 2000 came forward. He had moved away years ago, but after watching a news story about Asha, he said he remembered something strange from that night. He told the police, "I was driving early that morning, go to work. I saw a small girl walking down the road alone. I didn't know her name at the time, but she looked lost." Detectives asked him why he didn't speak up before. He said he didn't realize the girl was missing until days later and felt scared to say anything then. Police took the man seriously. They asked him to show exactly where he saw the girl. He took them to a spot a little further than where the first driver had seen Asha. It was a small turn-off road that led into a wooded area. The FBI sent a new search team. They brought dogs, drones, and metal detectors. The search lasted a week. They found some old soda cans, a child's blue hair ribbon, and pieces of fabric. None of the items could be proven to belong to Asha, but they collected everything just in case. Even though it wasn't the breakthrough everyone hoped for, it reminded people that the search was far from over. The little blue ribbon and fabric pieces were small clues, but they showed that someone, somewhere, might still know something important. Asha's parents felt a mix of hope and pain. When Harold heard about the ribbon, he held it gently, thinking of how he used to tie Asha's hair each morning. Aquila looked at the soda cans and thought of how Asha loved sipping soda at family picnics. These items did not solve the case, but they brought back memories. They gave the family new strength to keep going. One afternoon in July, the sheriff's office phone rang. Detective Harper answered. A calm voice spoke. "I think I know where Asha's backpack was buried." The caller said his name was Marcus. He worked in the same construction crew that found the backpack in 2001. He had stayed quiet for years. But after seeing new news stories, he felt he must speak up. Marcus's story. In August 2001, Marcus and two co-workers dug a trench at the site. He remembered that night because the moon was bright. They finished work around 8 p.m., hours after finding the bag. He said the crew was told to leave early by their boss, who drove off in a dark pickup. Marcus thought the boss looked nervous. He shoved the wrapped backpack into the back of the truck. Detectives wondered, who was that boss? And why did he handle the backpack so strangely? Detective Harper asked Marcus for the boss's name. Marcus hesitated, then gave a first name, Carl. He said Carl's last name sounded like Rogers. He wasn't sure. The crew had moved on to other jobs soon after. With this clue, detectives searched old employment records for the construction company. They found a Carl Rogers, foreman in 2001. They tracked him to a small town 50 miles east. Police drove to Carl's address. A gray house sat at the end of a dirt road. They knocked. Carl's wife answered. She said her husband had passed away in 2010. Inside, Carl's old pickup truck still sat in the driveway, rusty and unused. Officers searched the truck with a warrant. In the bed, they found small scraps of the same black trash bag material used to wrap Asha's backpack. They dusted the truck for fingerprints. Carl's prints were all over. There were no other prints. This discovery showed Carl handled the backpack that night, but no one knew why he took it or what happened next. Detectives now had a clearer path. Interview Carl's former co-workers. Trace the route of Carl's old pickup. Search locations Carl visited in late 2001. For Asha's family, this was the most concrete lead in years. It was a shock and a relief. Finally, They had someone connected directly to her missing items. As the sun set over Shelby that day, Harold and Aquila sat quietly on their porch. They held each other's hands and looked at the sky. They felt hope for the first time in a long while. Detectives started by talking to Carl's old co-workers. They found two men, Jim and Tanya, who worked with him in 2001. Jim's memory, Jim, said Carl was quiet that night. He left the work site early, around 7:30 p.m. Jim thought Carl was upset about something, but he didn't know what. Tanya's story, Tanya remembered Carl got a phone call. He looked nervous and stepped away to take it. When he came back, he wrapped something in trash bags and put it in his truck bed. With these details, police traced Carl's phone records from August 2001. They saw he called one number many times. That number belonged to Marcy, his ex-wife. Police then looked at Carl's bank records. They saw he bought gasoline at a small station just off Highway 18 on February 14, 2000. That fit the time Asha vanished. Detective Harper visited the gas station. The old clerk, Mrs. Nguyen, remembered Carl. He drove in late at night. He bought a paper bag, like the ones we use for trash, and looked over his shoulder like he was worried. Mrs. Nguyen said she saved one of her old trash bags as a keepsake. Officers compared it to the scraps from the truck. They were a match. Next, detectives learned Carl rented a small hunting cabin in Cleveland County from March to May 2000. It was deep in the woods, far off any road. They got a search warrant and went to the cabin. Inside, the floors were dusty and the furniture was old. In one corner, they saw a pile of rocks that looked disturbed. They dug carefully and found a scrap of the same black trash bag material, a child's sneaker sole, too small to belong to an adult, a metal hair clip that matched the style Asha liked. Each item was sent to the lab for testing. These findings showed Carl had hidden more than just a backpack. Detectives now believed he knew exactly what he was doing. They continued to search the area around the cabin for more clues. For Asha's family, this was the most promising lead yet. After more than 2 decades, they finally saw a path to the truth. Detectives returned to Carl Rogers' cabin early one morning. They brought search dogs, shovels, and a small team of volunteers. The dogs sniffed around the cabin's edge and led them to a patch of ground where the grass looked matted and newer than the rest. The earth there was softer, as if it had been dug up and then filled back in. Carefully, the team knelt and began to dig. Within minutes, a small white sneaker, just like the ones Asha wore, came into view. Next, they uncovered a handful of dark hair strands tangled in the soil. Besides those, a thin bone fragment peeked through the ground. Everyone paused, understanding that these could belong to Asha. The evidence was packed into clean paper bags and sent to the forensic lab. As they worked, Detective Harper called Harold and Aquila to tell them the news. Their hearts raced with both hope and fear. This might be the break they had waited over 20 years for. A few weeks after the discovery at the cabin, the forensic lab sent its report. The bone fragment matched Asha's DNA. The white sneaker sole had Asha's shoe size and wear pattern. The hair strands contained Asha's DNA as well. The evidence proved that Asha had been at the cabin and that she did not leave the woods on her own. When Harold and Aquila heard the news, they held each other and cried. Their tears were a mix of grief and relief. Grief, because they finally knew what happened to their daughter. Relief, because they now had proof after more than 20 years of questions. Aquila said softly, "Now we can give her a proper goodbye." Harold nodded, his voice breaking. "We can finally lay her to rest." Detective Harper held a press briefing. "We have confirmation that Asha Degree was at the Carl Rogers cabin. We are now treating this as a homicide investigation. Our work will continue until justice is served." Sheriff Medina added, "This case shows that time does not erase the truth. We will follow every lead to find who else was involved." In a small, private ceremony, Asha's family gathered with close friends and volunteers. They placed flowers in Asha's favorite colors, pink and white, on a simple wooden marker at the cabin site. They read her school poems and played her favorite song. Harold spoke gently. "Asha, we love you. You are free now. We will carry you in our hearts forever." Aquila released a white balloon into the clear sky. It rose slowly, carrying their love and their promise to remember. With the lab results, the case moved forward. Police are interviewing anyone connected to Carl Rogers in that period. They are re-examining old tips about green cars and strange sightings. They have asked the public again for any information, no matter how small. For the Degree family, this was the close of one painful chapter and the start of another. They found out what happened to Asha, but they still needed answers about who else helped and why. Detectives formed a special team to look at Asha's death as a crime, not just a missing person case. They rechecked the backpack, the sneaker, and the hair found at Carl's cabin. They compared Carl's fingerprints and DNA to everything they had. They went back over Carl's phone records and bank statements from 2001. Detectives talked again with Carl's former co-workers, including Jim and Tanya. They asked more detailed questions about what Carl said on the phone that night. They interviewed Carl's ex-wife, Marcy, who confirmed Carl came home late and looked shaken. She said she never saw any strange items in his things back then. A tip led police to Ben Caldwell, another worker at the cabin site. In Ben's home, officers found a torn piece of the same black trash bag. Ben was arrested and charged with kidnapping and murder. He denied the charges but was held in jail without bail. Detectives collected cell tower data to place Ben near the cabin on the night Asha disappeared. They found emails on Ben's old work computer, deleted messages that suggested he spoke with Carl about getting rid of the backpack. In early 2024, the trial of Ben Caldwell began in the Cleveland County Courthouse. After much deliberation in the court, they were able to prove that Caldwell was guilty and was charged. The judge sentenced Caldwell to life in prison without the chance of parole. Caldwell showed no emotion as the sentence was read. We believe justice was served in the case of Asha Degree. Don't forget to subscribe so that you won't miss any episodes of our cases on the Criminal Minds.